Hello everyone, welcome back. Thanks for joining me today. We have a great story to read and I hope that you're excited. Follow along and when we get done we'll talk about some of the literary elements. Maybe you guys can help me answer some of these questions. Our story today is called The Story of a Great Story. Pretty interesting, but we're going to find out. This story is about a real life person who inspired some great stories later on. Let's get started. The Story of a Great Story. 300 years ago in Scotland, there lived a young man whose name was Alexander Selkirk. He was rude and wild. He often caused trouble among his neighbors. For this reason, many people were glad when he ran away from home and went to sea. "We hope that he will get what he deserves," they said. He was big and strong and soon became a fine sailor. But he was still headstrong and grumpy, and he was often getting into trouble with the other sailors. Once, his ship was sailing in the Great Pacific Ocean. They were 400 miles from the coast of South America. Then something happened which Selkirk did not like, and he became very unhappy. He argued with the other sailors and even with the captain. "I would rather live on a desert island than be a sailor on this ship," he said. "Very well," answered the captain. "We will drop you off at the first island that we see." "Do so," said Selkirk. "You cannot please me better." Well, the very next day they caught sight of a little green island. There were groves of trees near the shore and high hills beyond them. "What is the name of this island?" asked Selkirk. "Juan Fernandez," said the captain. "Put me on shore and leave me there. Give me a few common tools and some food, and I will be fine," said the sailor. "It shall be done," answered the captain. So they filled a small boat with the things that he would need the most: an axe, a hoe, a kettle, and some other things. They also put in some bread and meat and other food, enough for several weeks. Then 4 of the sailors rowed him to the shore and left him there. Now, Alexander Selkirk was all alone on the island. He began to see how foolish he had been. He thought how terrible it was going to be to live there without one friend, without one person who he could speak to. He called loudly to the sailors and to the captain, "Please, do not leave me here. Take me back. I will give you no more trouble." But they would not listen to him. The ship sailed away and was soon lost to sight. Then Selkirk set to work to make the best of things. He built himself a little hut for shelter at night and during stormy weather. He planted a small garden. There were pigs and goats on the island, and plenty of fish could be caught from the shore, so there was always plenty of food. Sometimes Selkirk saw ships sailing in the distance. He tried to make signals to them. He called as loudly as he could, but he was neither seen nor heard, and the ships never came any nearer. "If I ever have the good fortune to escape from this island," he said, "I will be kind and helpful to everyone. I will try to make friends instead of enemies." For 4 years and 4 months he lived alone on the island. Then, to his great joy, a ship came near and anchored in the little harbor. He called out to them, and the captain agreed to take him back to his own country. When he got back to Scotland, everybody was eager to hear him tell the story of his adventures, and soon he had become famous. In England, there was a man whose name was Daniel Defoe. He was an author writing books. He had written many stories that people liked to read. When Daniel Defoe heard how Selkirk had lived alone on the island of Juan Fernandez, he said to himself, "Now here is something I could write a book about. The story of Alexander Selkirk is very interesting." So, Daniel Defoe sat down and wrote a wonderful story which he called The Adventures of Robinson Crusoe. Now, many people have read this book and many people have enjoyed the story. When only a child, he liked to stand by the river and see the ships sailing past. He wondered where they had come from and where they were going. He talked with some of the sailors. They told him about the strange lands they visited far away over the sea. They told him about the wonderful things they had seen there. He was delighted. "Oh, I wish I could be a sailor," said Robinson Crusoe. He could not think of anything else. He thought how grand it would be to sail and sail on the wide blue sea. He thought how pleasant it would be to visit strange countries and see strange peoples. As he grew up, his father wanted him to go to school. "No, no, I am going to be a sailor. I'm going to see the world," said Crusoe. His mother told him, "A sailor's life is hard. There are huge storms on the sea. Many ships get wrecked, and the sailors drown." "Well, I am not afraid," said Robinson Crusoe. "I am going to be a sailor and nothing else." So, when he was 18 years old, he ran away from his home and went to sea on a ship. And he soon found that his mother was right in her warnings. A sailor's life is indeed a hard life. There is no time to play. Every day there is much work to be done, and sometimes there is great danger. Robinson Crusoe sailed first on one ship and then on another. He visited many lands and saw many wonderful things. One day there was a great storm. The ship was tossed around by the wind and it wrecked. All of the sailors drowned, except for Robinson Crusoe. He swam to an island that was not far away. It was a small island, and there was no one living on it. But there were birds in the woods and some wild goats on the hills. For a long time, Robinson Crusoe was all alone. He only had a dog and some cats to keep him company. Then he tamed a parrot and some goats. He built a house out of some sticks and vines. He planted grain and baked bread. He made a boat for himself. He did many things. He was busy every day. At last, a ship passed by his island and Robinson was taken on board. He was happy to be able to go back to England and see his home and his friends once more. This is the story which Mr. Daniel Defoe wrote. Perhaps he would not have thought of it had he not first heard the true story of Alexander Selkirk. Wow. Did y'all like that? That is pretty exciting. Can you imagine being stuck on an island by yourself? Woo! I don't know if I would like that. Let's break it down some. Let's talk about it. Who's our characters in this story? Well, what's interesting about this story, right, is that we said, again, what's the title? The Story of a Great Story. We almost have two stories in this one reading that we did, okay? We have the story of the true Alexander Selkirk. But then we also get to hear the story of Robinson Crusoe, right? So we kind of have those two characters. We have Alexander Selkirk, who was a real person, and Robinson Crusoe, who was a fictional character, a character of a story that was written by who? Do you remember the author's name? Daniel Defoe. Good. Great. All right. Let's talk about the setting. Where does this story take place? Well, again, because we have two different kind of stories in this, we can talk about the setting of everything. So, Alexander Selkirk, do you remember where he was from? Well, it tells us once or twice in here, okay? Actually, the very first sentence of the story tells us. Let's reread that first sentence. 300 years ago in Scotland, there lived a young man whose name was Alexander Selkirk. Okay, there you go. We know where it was, Scotland, and we know how long ago, too, which is pretty cool. 300 years ago. That's a long time. So the setting for that is 300 years ago in Scotland. Now, the second part, when we read about Robinson Crusoe, it doesn't say necessarily, let's see, it doesn't say where he is born, but we find out where he's from because he goes home, right? And it says he was happy to be able to go back to England and see his home and his friends once more. So Robinson Crusoe was from England, okay? So the setting of where these guys are from is all in Europe, different places, Scotland, England, really all from the UK, right? The island up there. The setting of where they got stranded, though, are both very similar, right? Where was that? On an island. An island with not just barren either. It had, and barren, right? Barren means there's nothing on it. No, there was stuff on it. There was trees and animals. So it's a pretty good place to be stranded, I guess, if you have to be stranded. But the island that they were stranded on, that's another setting. Okay? And we know the name of one of the islands. We know the name of the island that Alexander Selkirk was stranded on. Juan Fernandez was the name of that island. Let's talk about the plot. And again, what's interesting is that we've got like two whole stories here in one. So let's talk about the plot of Alexander Selkirk. He is what? He's a young man in Scotland, but it says he was rude and wild, and he often caused trouble among his neighbors. So what does he do? He gets on a ship and he becomes a good sailor. And one day, he gets into a fight with the people on his boat, and he says, what? What does he tell them? He says, take me off, drop me off somewhere. I don't want to go with you guys anymore. Captain said, sure, man, we'll drop you off, right? So they did. And the climax of this story, right? So the introduction of Alexander Selkirk, the beginning of the story, is him kind of like running away from home, not running, but getting on a boat, becoming a sailor, leaving his home. The end of his story is what? He comes back from the island, okay? That's how the conclusion is. The climax is probably, to me, in this part, in the story of Alexander Selkirk, to me, the climax is when he is on the island, and he's not sure what he's going to do, but he ends up figuring out how to live on the island. He gets animals, he gets food, he makes a place to live, okay? So he does a lot of that kind of stuff. And to me, that's kind of the climax. It builds up to him living alone on the island, and then he finally gets rescued, and it goes to our conclusion when he goes home. Now let's talk about Robinson Crusoe. Robinson Crusoe is similar, but it's not the exact same, okay? There is a difference in how his story starts. Did his family want him to be a sailor? No. His dad wanted him to what? His father wanted him to go to school. So his parents wanted him to go to school. They said, don't be a sailor. It's a hard life. You don't want to do that. It's dangerous. But Robinson Crusoe, he ran away from home when he turned 18. And he jumped on a ship, started sailing. Now the climax of his story is what? What happened when he was on that ship? Because Alexander Selkirk asked to be left. He said, put me off by myself, that's fine. What happened to Robinson Crusoe? He didn't ask. Remember what happened to his ship? It wrecked. And all of his friends, well, all of the sailors on his boat, I don't know if they were his friends, but everybody except for him drowned. And he was the only one to survive. And he had to swim to that island that he was stuck on. But kind of the same climax as the true story of Alexander Selkirk. He learns to tame animals. He makes shelter. He even trains a parrot, I guess, to talk to. You know, it's better than nothing. And then his conclusion as well as Alexander Selkirk, right? Robinson Crusoe, he finally is able to catch a ship that comes by, and he says, hey, can you take me home? And they do, right? So it's a pretty cool plot. Is there a theme to this story? What's a theme? You remember? A theme is, what is the author teaching us, right? What does this story teach us, if anything? Okay? What do you think? Is there a moral to this story? Is there a lesson to be learned here? Maybe from Robinson Crusoe or from Alexander Selkirk? Well, to me, Alexander Selkirk, the lesson that he learned is, hey, you know, you might not want to be so mean to people and make enemies. And he even says that, right? He says, oh, if I can ever get out of here, I will try to make friends instead of enemies. I will be kind and helpful to everyone. Because he realizes that being alone, right, is not worth it. It's not what he wanted. So he realized he had been kind of mean all these days. And now, hopefully, when he gets back home, right, it doesn't really tell us, but hopefully he's really nice to everybody when he gets back. What's the point of view of this story? Think about the point of view. Well, first person point of view is if you were telling me the story, or if I was telling you the story. If I was saying, now I woke up this morning and I, had breakfast and went on a run. But that's not how the story goes. If it was a second person point of view, it would be somebody in the story that's telling you and that you're a part of it. So saying, now you just got on a boat and you're sailing through the ocean and you just wrecked and you went to an island and you are taming goats and building shelters. No, that's not how this is going. We have characters in this story, right? So it's third person point of view because we follow some characters around. We get to hear what they say. We see what they do. We hear them talk to each other. We get to watch them. Okay, so it's third person point of view, this story. Who's telling us this story? You could say that the author is the one telling the story, but I mean, this story is being told from the point of view of our characters, really. It's Alexander Selkirk saying what he's doing, right? He's figuring out how to build things, and he's talking to the captain and saying, drop me off over there. So, we're getting this story told to us from these guys, really. And guess what? If you were alive 300 years ago in Scotland, when Alexander Selkirk got home, you could have heard him tell the story to you. That's a pretty cool thing, isn't it? Here we are, we're reading about it. But once upon a time, 300 years ago, Alexander Selkirk, he was telling people his own story, this story. Except it was really real life for him. Wow. That's cool. When I read this, I almost think like, hey, that sounds kind of nice. Like, I could live on an island and have some goats and stuff, but you know what? The reality is, that would probably be a pretty hard life. So it's pretty amazing that somebody like Alexander Selkirk was able to figure out how to survive on this island, and that he made it home alive to tell his story, right? Thank y'all for joining me today. I hope y'all enjoyed as much as I did, and I can't wait until our next time. So, keep reading, keep learning. If you guys want, get online and print off our story, and you can read it for yourselves. Maybe read it to somebody. Maybe share this cool story with somebody that you like. All right. See y'all next time. Have a great day. Bye, everybody.